In the mansion of a control-obsessed millionaire, a dedicated nanny was the only link of light in the lives of the silent twins. Everything crumbles when a briefcase disappears and she is unjustly accused, transforming care and routine into absolute terror. But the girls' silence begins to break, revealing that their small eyes saw what no one dared to investigate. And it is then that the hidden truth explodes. Only they can bring down the lie that put their nanny behind bars. The wrought iron gate opened slowly, revealing the impeccable garden that Amelia already knew so well. It was 6 in the morning and the sun was beginning to paint the New York City sky with orange hues, reflecting in the enormous windows of the mansion that stood imposingly in the middle of the Upper East Side. Amelia adjusted the bag on her shoulder and walked along the cobblestone path, feeling the coolness of the grass freshly watered by the gardeners who had been working since before dawn. 3 years working in that house, and she was still impressed by the grandeur of the place. The mansion had 3 floors, an indoor and an outdoor pool, a library that occupied an entire wing, and a garden that looked more like a private park. But none of that mattered as much as what awaited her inside. Amelia smiled at the thought of the 2 girls who would surely be awake by now, probably sitting at their bedroom window, waiting to see her arrive as they did every morning. Elizabeth, the housekeeper, opened the door before Amelia even rang the bell. The woman in her early 50s had the tired face of someone who woke up before everyone else and went to sleep after everyone else. "Good morning, Amelia. The girls are already awake. I didn't even have to call them today." Amelia smiled and entered, leaving her bag in the hall closet. She went up the marble stairs with light steps, knowing each one by heart. The 2nd floor was the twins' territory. Chloe and Olivia had just turned 7 the week before, and Amelia had prepared a simple but special party with chocolate cake and pink balloons, their favorite colors. Upon reaching the hallway, she saw the 2 doors ajar. Chloe appeared first, peeking with those enormous brown eyes that seemed to see everything. Seconds later, Olivia emerged beside her, sister, identical in every way except for a small mole in the corner of her left eye that Amelia used to tell them apart when they weren't speaking. Amelia knelt to their level and opened her arms. The girls ran and threw themselves into her embrace, a morning ritual that never failed. They said nothing, as was their custom, but Amelia felt the grip of their small arms around her neck and knew they were happy. "Good morning, my darlings. Did you sleep well?" Chloe nodded, while Olivia pointed to the room. Amelia understood the silent invitation and followed them. Inside. The room was a child's dream, with walls painted a soft lilac, 2 beds with white canopies, and shelves full of books and toys. But what drew the most attention were the drawings. The walls had frames with the girls' paintings, and a large table near the window was always covered with colored pencils, markers, and sheets of paper. Olivia picked up a sketchbook and showed it to Amelia. It was a garden full of colorful flowers, with 2 girls holding hands in the center. Amelia recognized the delicate strokes and careful details that Olivia always included in her work. "It's beautiful, Olivia. These flowers look real." The girl smiled shyly and put the sketchbook away. Chloe, in turn, pulled Amelia by the hand to the window and pointed to the garden below. Amelia looked and saw Mr. Richard Blackwood walking hurriedly towards the garage, his cell phone glued to his ear. His brow furrowed as always. He wore an impeccable dark suit, his shoes shining even from a distance. Her employer didn't look up once. "He left early today," Amelia commented softly. "He must have important meetings." Chloe and Olivia exchanged a look that Amelia couldn't interpret. The ooh. Girls had their own way of communicating, a silent language that required no words. Amelia had learned to respect their private world, never forcing, never invading. That was why she had managed to win the twins' trust when all the previous nannies had failed. In the first few months, she just observed. She stayed nearby, available but without pressure. She learned that Chloe liked to watch the clouds and invent stories about them, while Olivia preferred to draw and paint. She discovered that they loved adventure stories, especially those with brave heroines. And most importantly, she understood that their silence was not empty, but full of thoughts and feelings that they simply preferred not to share with most people. "How about we have breakfast? I bet Elizabeth made those pancakes you love." The girls nodded excitedly and ran ahead. Amelia followed them, descending the stairs carefully. The mansion was always quiet in the morning. Mr. Blackwood had already left and wouldn't be back before 8 at night, if he returned at all. In the 3 years she had worked there, Amelia could count on one hand the times she had seen him interact with his daughters for more than 5 minutes at a time. The kitchen was enormous, fully equipped with state-of-the-art appliances that gleamed impeccably. Elizabeth had already set the table, and the smell of fresh pancakes filled the air. The twins sat side by side, as always, and Amelia joined them. As they ate, Amelia watched the girls. They conversed with each other through glances and minimal gestures, a communication system they had developed since they were very young. Occasionally, one of them would whisper something so low that Amelia could barely hear it, and the other would respond in the same way. It was as if they shared a constant secret, a private world that no one else could truly be a part of. After breakfast, Amelia took the girls to the garden. The morning was beautiful, with that gentle sun that didn't yet burn. They played hide-and-seek among the trees, and Amelia noticed how Chloe always waited for Olivia to hide first, and how Olivia always chose a spot from where she could see where her sister was. They never completely separated. It was as if a part of each of them lived in the other. Around 10 o'clock, Amelia brought them back inside for their lessons. Mr. Blackwood had hired private tutors who came 3 times a week, but on the other days, Amelia was responsible for keeping the girls engaged with educational activities. She had discovered that they learned best through stories and games, so she turned math into a treasure hunt and English into storytelling. That morning, while they were working on a world map puzzle, Amelia heard heavy footsteps downstairs. She found it strange, as Mr. Blackwood never came back so early. The girls heard it too and stopped what they were doing, tensing up in a way Amelia rarely saw. "Her," employer's voice echoed through the hall, speaking on the phone in an agitated tone she had never heard before. There was urgency in it, perhaps even nervousness. Amelia got up and went to the bedroom door, keeping the girls behind her. She had no intention of eavesdropping, but the intensity of his voice put her on alert. "I told you it's handled. No one will find anything, do you hear me? It's all stored exactly where we planned." Silence while the person on the other end spoke. "I don't care what they think, they have no proof of anything, and even if they did, I know exactly how to deal with it." Amelia quickly returned to the room, closing the door carefully. The twins watched her with those big, attentive eyes. She forced a smile and went back to the puzzle as if nothing had happened, but her heart was beating faster than normal. The rest of the day passed normally. Amelia prepared the light lunch the girls liked, supervised their silent reading time, and then took them to their piano lesson with the teacher who came every Thursday. Chloe had an easier time with music, but Olivia tried hard to keep up with her sister, and Amelia was always impressed with her determination. When the teacher left, it was almost 5 in the afternoon. Amelia was helping the girls put away their toys when Elizabeth appeared at the door with a strange expression on her face. "Amelia, Mr. Blackwood wants to see you. He's in his office." Amelia felt a knot in her stomach without knowing exactly why. In 3 years, she had never been called to her employer's private office. In fact, that room was forbidden territory for everyone except him and occasionally his partners for important meetings. "Can you stay with the girls for a moment? I'll be right back." Elizabeth nodded, and Amelia went downstairs, her legs feeling a bit shaky. The office was on the first floor, a huge room with mahogany shelves reaching the ceiling, filled with books that seemed to have never been opened. Mr. Blackwood was sitting behind the imposing desk, shuffling papers with abrupt movements. "You asked to see me, sir?" He looked up, and Amelia noticed something different in his gaze. Suspicion, perhaps, or maybe she was imagining things. "Amelia, I need you to understand something. This house has very specific rules. Privacy is fundamental to me and my business." "Yes, sir, I understand." He stood up and walked to the window, his hands behind his back. In that position, Amelia could see the dark wooden cabinet in the corner of the room, with its closed doors and an old but sturdy lock. She cleaned that room once a week, always carefully, never touching anything more than necessary. "I want to be sure that you aren't curious about matters that don't concern you." Amelia felt her face grow hot. Never in her entire professional life had someone questioned her integrity like that. "Mr. Blackwood, I have always respected your privacy and that of this house. My job is to care for the girls, and that is what I do." He stared at her for a long moment before nodding. "Good. You may return to your duties." Amelia left the office with her hands trembling. She went upstairs trying to understand what had just happened, but an uncomfortable feeling had settled in her chest. Something was wrong in that house. She could feel it. And that black briefcase she always saw in the office cabinet during her weekly cleanings, that briefcase that never moved from its spot, suddenly seemed to carry a weight far greater than its size suggested. When Amelia returned to the twins' room, she found Chloe and Olivia sitting on the rug, drawing in silence. Elizabeth had left, and the girls seemed absorbed in their private worlds. Amelia approached slowly and sat down beside them, observing the drawings taking shape on the paper. Chloe was drawing the mansion from the outside, with its large windows and surrounding garden. Olivia, always more detailed, was drawing the interior of a room Amelia couldn't immediately identify. There was a tall bookshelf, a large desk, and two small figures in the corner watching. "What a beautiful drawing, Olivia. Is it a room in the house?" The girl paused for a moment, looked at Chloe, and then slowly nodded. But she said nothing more, returning to colouring with her pencils. Amelia didn't insist. She had learned that pressuring the twins never worked. They opened up when they felt ready, in their own time. The late afternoon passed with the usual routine. Amelia helped the girls with their bath, prepared the light dinner they ate in their room while watching an educational cartoon, and then read a story before bed. It was a book about two sisters who travelled through a magical kingdom, and the twins loved that story. Chloe always asked Amelia to read the same passage over and over, the one where the sisters promised never to be separated. When Amelia finally turned off the lights and left the room, leaving only the nightlight on, it was almost 8 at night. She went downstairs to get her bag and leave, but stopped when she heard voices coming from the office. Mr. Blackwood was there, and he wasn't alone. "This can't leak, no. Matter what? Do you understand what's at stake here?" The voice that answered was male, but Amelia didn't recognize it. "It's all documented. If anyone finds out, it's not just your company that goes down, it's all of us. I know that. That's why I took the necessary precautions. No one will find anything because there's nothing to find. It's all stored where they'll never look." Amelia moved away quickly, her heart racing. She didn't want to hear that, didn't want to know anything that could compromise her. She grabbed her bag and left through the back door, breathing in the cool night air as if she had been underwater for too long. On the bus back home, Amelia stared out the window without really seeing the illuminated streets of New York City. She lived in a small apartment in Astoria, Queens, which she shared with her younger sister, Julia. The commute took almost an hour, time she usually used to rest or read, but that night her mind kept returning to the conversation she wasn't supposed to have heard. When she got home, Julia was in the living room, studying for an exam for her education degree. She was 22, 5 years younger than Amelia, and dreamed of being a special education teacher. "Hey sis, how was your day?" "Exhausting," Amelia replied, taking off her shoes and throwing herself on the sofa. "The girls were restless today." Julia closed her notebook and looked at her sister with that expression that meant she knew when something was wrong. "What happened? And don't tell me it's nothing, because I know you." Amelia sighed. She didn't want to worry her sister, but she couldn't keep it all to herself either. "My boss called me into his office today. He's never done that before. He went on about privacy as if I were snooping into his things. That's strange. Did you do anything different?" "Nothing. I do my job. I take care of the girls. I clean his office once a week like I always have. I don't touch anything." Julia frowned, concerned. "I think you should be careful, Amelia. Rich and powerful people like that, when they get paranoid, they can do anything." Amelia knew her sister was right, but she couldn't imagine leaving the twins. Chloe and Olivia needed her. Without Amelia, they would be completely alone in that huge mansion, with a father who barely knew their names. The next morning, Amelia woke up early as always and caught the 5:30 bus. She arrived at the mansion as the day was just beginning to break. Elizabeth greeted her at the door, but there was something different about her manner. The housekeeper avoided looking directly at Amelia and quickly moved away after a curt greeting. Amelia went up to the twins' room, but they were still sleeping. She used the time to tidy up the playroom next door. It was a large room filled with shelves of games, books, and toys of all kinds. It also had a large closet where they kept art supplies and costumes. While organizing the scattered colored pencils, Amelia heard footsteps in the hallway. It was Mr. Blackwood, which was strange because he never came up to the girls' floor in the morning. He passed by the playroom door, looked inside, saw Amelia, and continued walking without a word. But Amelia caught the tension in his shoulders, the hurry in his steps. Minutes later, he came back down the same hallway, now carrying a leather briefcase. His eyes met Amelia's for a brief second, and she saw something in his gaze that made her freeze. It wasn't exactly anger, but a calculated coldness that scared her. The twins woke up soon after, and Amelia tried to focus on them, pushing away the bad thoughts. They had breakfast, played in the garden, studied a little, but throughout the day Amelia felt eyes following her. When she went to the kitchen for water, Elizabeth would stop talking to the other maid as soon as she saw her. When she passed the gardener in the hallway, he would quickly look away. On Thursday, Amelia had to do the weekly cleaning of the office. Normally, she did it early in the morning before Mr. Blackwood came down to work, but he asked her to do it in the afternoon, after 3. When Amelia entered the room with her cleaning supplies, he was sitting at the desk watching her. "Be quick, please. I have an important meeting in an hour." Amelia worked in silence, cleaning the shelves, wiping down the furniture, vacuuming the Persian rug. When she got near the wooden cabinet in the corner, the one where she always saw the locked black briefcase, she automatically wiped the door as she did every week. But this time Mr. Blackwood stood up abruptly. "Leave that. You can clean the rest." Amelia immediately moved away, mumbling an apology. She finished the job as quickly as she could and left the room with her legs shaking. Something was very wrong. The tension in the house was palpable, and she was at the center of it all, without understanding why. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Amelia went downstairs to leave and found Mr. Blackwood in the hall, talking on the phone. He gestured for her to wait, and Amelia stood there holding her bag, trying not to listen to the conversation but unable to avoid it. "Yes, it's all taken care of. No one will have access. I guarantee it." A pause. "It doesn't matter. If anyone asks, I have someone to blame. It's all planned." When he hung up and looked at Amelia, she felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in his eyes that made her want to run, but she held her ground. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." He just nodded, and Amelia left, feeling the weight of his gaze on her back until she closed the door. On the bus, she thought about quitting. It would be the sensible thing to do, but then she remembered the twins' faces when she arrived in the morning, the way they ran to hug her, how Chloe held her hand when she was scared, and how Olivia smiled only for her. She couldn't abandon them, not yet. On Friday, the tension reached a new level. Amelia arrived and noticed men in suits in the living room, talking in low voices with Mr. Blackwood. She went up to the twins' room quickly and stayed there all day, barely leaving. The girls sensed something was different and were quieter than usual, drawing compulsively page after page. Amelia looked at the drawings and noticed a pattern. Every sheet showed the same scene, repeated with slight variations. A room with tall shelves, an adult figure, a dark box or briefcase, and always, 2 small girls watching from a distance. She wanted to ask what it meant, but something stopped her. Perhaps the fear of knowing the answer. When Monday came, Amelia entered the mansion and knew immediately that something had changed. The silence was different, heavier, charged with expectation. Elizabeth didn't even greet her. The other servants disappeared as soon as they saw her, and when Amelia passed the office on her way to the stairs, she saw through the ajar door that the wooden cabinet was open and the black briefcase was no longer there. Amelia went up the stairs, trying to ignore the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The twins were already awake, sitting at their bedroom window, looking at the garden. When they saw Amelia enter, they didn't run to hug her as usual. They just sat there watching her with those huge, frightened eyes. "Good morning, girls. Is everything okay?" Chloe looked at Olivia, and Olivia looked back. Then, slowly, they both got down from the window and walked to Amelia, but their hugs were different. Tighter, more desperate, as if they were clinging to something they might lose at any moment. Amelia felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to ask what they knew, what they had seen, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she held the two girls in her arms and stayed like that for a long moment, trying to convey safety through touch since words seemed insufficient. "How about we make pancakes today? We can make them in star shapes like you like." The girls nodded, but without their usual enthusiasm. They went down to the kitchen holding hands, as always, but Amelia noticed they were constantly looking around, like small animals alert to any danger. In the kitchen, Elizabeth was making coffee, but when Amelia entered with the twins, the housekeeper muttered some excuse and left quickly. Amelia stood for a moment, processing that obvious reaction. It wasn't her imagination anymore. Something very serious was happening, and everyone in the house knew, except her. She prepared breakfast, for the girls in silence, her mind working frantically to piece things together. The missing briefcase, Mr. Blackwood's tension, the conversations about hiding something, the change in all the servants' behavior. What was going on? The twins ate little, pushing the food around on their plates without appetite. Chloe dropped her fork twice, and Olivia spilled juice on the table. These were accidents that never happened. The girls were always careful, in control of every movement. Seeing that lack of coordination made Amelia realize how upset they were. After breakfast, Amelia took the girls back to their room. They didn't want to play in the garden. They didn't want to draw. They didn't want to do anything. They sat together on the rug, hugging each other, watching the door as if expecting something bad to enter at any moment. Amelia tried to distract them with stories, with games, but nothing worked. Finally, she just sat beside them and stayed there, a silent presence of support. Sometimes there were no right words, only presence. Around 11 in the morning, Amelia heard raised voices downstairs. She left the twins in their room with the door closed and went down to the middle of the staircase, trying to understand what was happening. Mr. Blackwood was in the hall talking to two men in suits whom Amelia didn't know. "Are you absolutely sure the documents were in that briefcase?" The voice of one of the men was deep and authoritative. "Absolutely. I put them there myself last Friday, and now they're gone." "When was the last time you saw the briefcase?" "Saturday morning. I checked before leaving for a meeting. Everything was there, locked in my office cabinet. When I came back on Sunday night to get something, I noticed it was gone." "Who has access to your office?" Amelia felt her stomach turn as she realized where this conversation was heading. "Only myself and the cleaning staff, but there's a specific person who cleans that room once a week." Amelia's heart started beating so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. She held onto the banister, her legs suddenly weak. "And you trust this person?" There was a long, deliberate pause. Amelia could imagine Mr. Blackwood looking up, knowing she might be listening, choosing his words carefully. "I used to, but recently I've noticed suspicious behavior, overly curious glances, indirect questions, and she was the only person besides me who was in that room last week." Amelia felt tears burn her eyes. He was lying. She had never done any of that. She had never shown more than normal curiosity, had never touched anything she shouldn't have. And now he was planting suspicion about her to men who were clearly some kind of investigators or lawyers. She went back up to the twins' room, trying to control her breathing. When she entered, the girls were standing, hugging each other, looking at her with fear evident in their eyes. They had heard, or felt it. Somehow they knew. Amelia knelt in front of them and held their small hands. "Listen, girls, no matter what you hear, no matter what they say, I didn't do anything wrong. Do you believe me?" Chloe nodded immediately, tears streaming down her face. Olivia squeezed Amelia's hand so hard it hurt, but she didn't care. The girls knew the truth. They always knew. The rest of the day passed in a haze of tension. Amelia kept the twins in their room, away from everyone and everything. They had lunch there, played there, stayed there as if the room were a safe haven in the middle of an approaching storm. In the late afternoon, as Amelia was helping the girls put away their toys, Olivia tugged on her sleeve and pointed under one of the beds. Amelia bent down and saw piles of drawings hidden there. She took a few and examined them in the light. They all showed the same scene that had been repeating for days. The office, the bookshelf, a male figure in a suit, a black briefcase, and always the two girls watching from a corner. But there was something new in these drawings. 1. The male figure was carrying the briefcase out of the room. In another, the briefcase appeared in a different place, which seemed to be the playroom. Amelia looked at the twins, her heart racing. "Did you see what happened to the briefcase?" The girls looked at each other, that silent communication that only they understood. Then Chloe nodded, yes, very slowly. Olivia pointed to the playroom next door. Amelia felt the blood run cold in her veins. The briefcase was hidden in the playroom. Mr. Blackwood had put it there and the twins had seen everything. But why? Why? Would he hide his own briefcase and then accuse someone of stealing it? She put the drawings back under the bed and hugged the girls, her mind working quickly. If the briefcase was really in the playroom, she needed to see it with her own eyes. But she also knew she could be walking into a trap. What if Mr. Blackwood wanted her to find the briefcase? What if this was part of some plan to frame her? The next few hours were torturous. Amelia put the girls to bed, read the usual story, turned off the lights. But instead of leaving as she did every night, she waited. She sat in the hallway in the dim light watching. Around 9 at night she heard footsteps. Mr. Blackwood came up the stairs, passed through the hallway without seeing her hidden in the shadows, and entered the playroom. Amelia held her breath. He stayed inside for a few minutes, then came out and went back downstairs, his footsteps echoing in the silent house. Amelia waited another 15 minutes before moving. She stood up slowly, her legs numb from sitting in the same position for so long. She walked to the playroom and opened the door carefully. The moonlight streamed through the large window, illuminating the room with a silvery, ghostly light. She scanned the room with her eyes. Everything seemed normal. The organized shelves, the toys in their places, the large closet closed as always. But the twins had seen something. They had drawn something. Amelia walked to the closet and opened the doors. There, in the back, half hidden behind boxes of board games and old costumes, was the black briefcase. Amelia stood paralyzed, staring at the object that had become the center of all the chaos. Her instincts screamed at her not to touch anything, to get out of there immediately. But a part of her needed to know. She needed to understand what was happening. Without touching the briefcase, she bent down to get a better look. It was ajar, and it was empty. Completely empty. No documents, no papers, nothing. Just the dark velvet interior staring back at her like an open mouth. Amelia felt nauseous. It was a trap. It had to be. Mr. Blackwood had emptied the briefcase, hidden the documents somewhere else, and placed the empty briefcase where she would eventually find it. And then he would say that she had stolen the contents. She closed the closet with trembling hands and left the playroom as quietly as possible. She needed to leave. She needed to think. But when she reached the top of the stairs, she saw Mr. Blackwood standing in the hall below, his cell phone in his hand, looking directly at her. "Working late, Amelia?" His voice was calm, almost friendly, but there was something sinister in that calmness. Amelia descended the stairs slowly, feeling like an animal walking straight into a trap. "I was just checking on the girls. They had a difficult day." He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure they did. Good night, Amelia. See you tomorrow." Amelia grabbed her bag and left, but before closing the door, she looked back one last time. Mr. Blackwood was still there, standing in the hall, phone in hand, watching her. And Amelia knew with a cold, terrible certainty that the next day everything would change. Amelia barely slept that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail, every word, every look. The empty briefcase, Mr. Blackwood's false smile, the fear in the twins' eyes. Everything pointed to something terrible being set up against her, but she didn't know how to protect herself. Julia found her sister in the kitchen at 4 in the morning, drinking coffee and staring into space. "Amelia, what's going on? You haven't slept at all." Amelia told her everything. The strange conversations, the missing briefcase, the veiled accusations, the way everyone was avoiding her. Julia listened with an increasingly worried expression. "You need to quit that job. Today. Right now." "I can't abandon the girls, Julia. They have no one else. You won't be helping anyone if you end up in jail for something you didn't do. This man is clearly planning something against you." Amelia knew her sister was right, but the image of the twins, hugging and scared, wouldn't leave her mind. She couldn't just leave, not yet. "I'm going to work today, and I'll be careful. If things get worse, I'll leave." Julia shook her head, frustrated, but didn't argue further. She hugged her sister tightly and watched her leave in the cold New York dawn, praying silently that everything would be okay. When Amelia arrived at the mansion, the gate took longer than usual to open. She had to ring the bell 3 times. When she finally got in, she immediately noticed something was different. There was an unfamiliar car parked in front of the house, a black sedan with tinted windows. Elizabeth wasn't at the door to greet her. In fact, no one was. Amelia entered slowly, the silence of the house pressing in on her like a physical presence. She left her bag in the hall closet and started up the stairs, but stopped when she heard voices coming from the office. So it's confirmed. The documents disappeared exactly when she had access to the room. "Yes, last Thursday. She was the last person to enter before I noticed their disappearance." Mr. Blackwood's voice was firm, without hesitation. "And you're sure no one else could have gotten in?" "Absolutely. The office is locked when I'm not there, and the only other person with access during cleaning is her." Amelia ran up the rest of the stairs, her heart pounding uncontrollably. He was building a case against her, lying openly, creating a false narrative, and she had no way to defend herself because there was no proof of her innocence, just as there was no proof of her guilt. Just the word of a rich and powerful man against a nanny with no resources. The twins were awake, sitting on the bed, hugging. When they saw Amelia, they ran to her, crying silently. Amelia hugged them, feeling the tears soak her blouse, feeling their desperation through the trembling of their small bodies. "It's okay. It's okay," she murmured, but she knew she was lying. Nothing was okay. They spent the morning locked in the room. Amelia didn't have the courage to leave, to face the stairs, to hear more veiled accusations. The twins wanted to do nothing but stay close to her, holding her hand, resting their heads on her shoulder. Around noon, Elizabeth knocked on the door. When Amelia opened it, the housekeeper didn't look her in the eye. "Mr. Blackwood wants you to come downstairs. There are people who need to speak with you." Amelia felt the floor give way beneath her. She looked at the twins, who were watching her with evident terror. She forced a smile. "I'll be right back, girls. Stay here and draw something pretty for me, okay?" But as Amelia left, Chloe began to cry softly, and Olivia held her, both knowing that something very bad was happening. Downstairs, Amelia found Mr. Blackwood in the living room with 2 men in suits. They weren't police officers, she realized immediately. They were lawyers or private investigators. "Amelia, please sit down," said Mr. Blackwood, pointing to an armchair. Amelia preferred to stand. She didn't want to sit, didn't want to pretend this was a normal conversation. One of the men opened a folder and took out some papers. His face was expressionless, professional. "Miss Amelia, your employer has informed us that extremely valuable documents have disappeared from his private office. Documents that were kept in a black briefcase locked in a cabinet. Do you know anything about this?" "I know the briefcase disappeared, but I had nothing to do with it." "Do you clean the office regularly?" "Once a week, yes, but I never touched anything other than what was necessary for cleaning." The man exchanged a look with Mr. Blackwood before continuing. "Mr. Blackwood informed us that you have shown an unusual interest in his business recently. You've asked questions about his private affairs." "That's a lie." Amelia felt anger rise, stronger than fear. "I never asked any questions. I never showed any interest. My job is to take care of his girls, not to meddle in his business." Mr. Blackwood stood up, his expression transformed into a mask of false concern. "Amelia, I understand you might be going through financial difficulties. I know you have a sister in college to support. If you simply return the documents, we can resolve this discreetly, without involving the authorities." Amelia felt like laughing at his audacity. He was offering a way out of a crime she hadn't committed, creating a complete narrative of motive and opportunity. "I don't have your documents. I don't know where they are. And it's interesting that you're so concerned about these papers that you never mentioned before, that no one knew existed until they conveniently disappeared." The atmosphere in the room changed. Mr. Blackwood's face hardened, the mask of concern falling away completely. "Be careful with your accusations, Amelia. You're in a very delicate position to be making insinuations. And you're in a very comfortable position to lie, aren't you?" Amelia surprised herself with her own courage. No one will question the word of a millionaire against a nanny. It's too convenient. One of the men in suits raised his hand, interrupting the confrontation. "Miss Amelia, I strongly recommend that you cooperate. If the documents are found in your possession, or if it's proven that you hid them, the consequences will be severe." Amelia took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Then investigate. Search. You won't find anything because I didn't do anything." She left the room before they could say anything more. She went up the stairs with firm steps, but when she reached the twins' room and closed the door, she let the tears finally fall. The girls hugged her immediately. Chloe held her face with her small hands and made her look at her. Then, for the first time in a long time, she spoke aloud, each word filled with conviction. "We know you didn't do anything wrong." Olivia nodded, adding, "We saw what really happened." Amelia looked at them both, her heart aching. They had seen, the silent witnesses to everything, but they were children, and no one would believe them, especially against their own father. The rest of the day was a nightmare. No one spoke to Amelia. When she went downstairs to get food for the girls, the servants turned their backs. Elizabeth left the room as soon as she entered. The gardener pretended not to see her when she passed him in the hallway. Mr. Blackwood didn't appear all day, but Amelia could feel his presence like a shadow over everything. He was somewhere planning his next move, tightening the net. In the late afternoon, Amelia was helping the girls get ready for dinner when she heard cars arriving. It wasn't Mr. Blackwood's car. There were several cars. She went to the window and looked down, feeling her blood run cold. 2 police cars were parked in front of the mansion. Amelia turned to the twins, trying to keep her face calm. But Chloe and Olivia already knew. They always knew. They ran to her and hugged her with all their might, their small bodies trembling with fear. "I love you," Amelia whispered, kissing both their heads. "Never forget that, and never forget the truth." Heavy footsteps were coming up the stairs. Amelia gently released the girls and walked to the door. She opened it before they knocked. 2 police officers were outside, and behind them Mr. Blackwood with an expression that tried to look sad, but that Amelia recognized as triumph. "Amelia Scott?" "Yes. You are under arrest on suspicion of theft of confidential and valuable documents. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The words continued, but Amelia no longer heard them. She just looked at the twins, who began to scream. Not words, just screams of despair and terror. Chloe ran to Amelia, trying to cling to her, but one of the officers stopped her. Olivia tried to run past, but Elizabeth held her back. "Don't take her. Don't take our Amelia," Chloe screamed, her voice hoarse from crying. "She didn't do anything. Daddy is lying," Olivia yelled, struggling against Elizabeth's hold. It was the first time the twins had spoken to strangers like that, the first time they had shown such intense emotion in front of other people, and as Amelia was led downstairs, handcuffed, she could hear the girls' screams echoing through the mansion, screams that seemed to tear through years of silence, finally exposing the pain that had always been there, hidden. The cell was small, cold, and smelled of cheap disinfectant. Amelia sat on a concrete bench, still processing what had happened. Arrested. She had been arrested for a crime she didn't commit, based solely on the word of a rich man who was clearly hiding something much bigger. A public defender had appeared briefly. Young, overworked, with a briefcase full of other cases, he listened to Amelia's story with a tired expression, jotted down a few things, and said he would do his best. But Amelia saw in his eyes that he didn't fully believe her. Why would he? It was her word against that of Richard Blackwood, a respected businessman, owner of a fortune built over decades. "Do you have any proof of your innocence?" the lawyer had asked. "The girls. The twins saw everything. They know the truth." He had sighed, closing his briefcase. "They're 7 years old, and they're his daughters. No judge will allow them to testify against their own father, especially when he's the one who supports them and has legal custody." Amelia lay down on the bench, staring at the stained ceiling. She thought of Chloe and Olivia, of their screams when they took her away. Were they okay? Who was taking care of them now? Had Mr. Blackwood hired another nanny, or had he left them completely alone in that huge mansion? The hours dragged on. Amelia barely touched the food they brought. Her stomach was in knots, her head ached, and despair threatened to consume her. But she forced herself to stay calm. She needed to think. She needed to find a way to prove her innocence. Julia managed to visit her the next day. The younger sister's eyes were red from crying, but she tried to stay strong. "I'm going to get you out of here, sis, I swear I will." Amelia held her sister's hand through the bars. "Julia, listen. The twins know the truth. They saw their father hide the briefcase. They drew everything. There are drawings hidden under their bed, in their room. Drawings that show exactly what happened." Julia wrote everything down with trembling hands. "I'll try to talk to them, or to someone in the house. There has to be a way." But they both knew it wouldn't be easy. Richard Blackwood had power, money, and influence, and Amelia had nothing but the truth, which seemed increasingly fragile against the machine moving against her. Meanwhile, in the Upper East Side mansion, Chloe and Olivia were living their own hell. Since Amelia had been taken away, the girls wouldn't eat properly, wouldn't sleep, wouldn't talk to anyone. They stayed locked in their room, hugging each other, crying softly. Mr. Blackwood had hired a new caregiver, a Mrs. Gable, a middle-aged woman with experience with difficult children. But the twins rejected her completely. When she tried to enter their room, they screamed. When she tried to talk to them, they turned their backs. When she prepared food, they left their plates untouched. "You need to eat something. Girls, you'll get sick." But Chloe and Olivia just curled up even more, hiding their faces in their pillows. Mrs. Gable looked at Mr. Blackwood with a worried expression. "Mr. Blackwood, they are in deep distress. They need professional help. This is beyond a childish tantrum. They're becoming depressed." Richard Blackwood looked at his daughters, and for the first time in a long time, something like remorse crossed his face. But it lasted only a second before being replaced by his usual coldness. "They'll get used to it. It's just a matter of time." But it wasn't a matter of time. With each passing day, the twins got worse. They stopped drawing, they stopped playing, they stopped doing anything except huddle together, whispering to each other in a language only they understood. One night, Elizabeth entered the room to bring dinner and found the girls drawing frantically. Sheets and sheets of paper were scattered on the floor, all showing the same scene. The office, the briefcase, their father, Amelia, far away and innocent. It was as if they were trying to tell the story in every possible way, trying to make someone understand. When Elizabeth got closer to see, Chloe quickly tore up all the drawings, and Olivia threw the pieces out the window. The housekeeper stood there, stunned, realizing that these children knew something important. But what could she do? She was just a maid, like Amelia. Who would believe her against her boss? At the police station, Amelia received daily visits from Julia, who brought increasingly worrying news. The twins were not well. They were wasting away, entering a state of deep despair. And the worst part was that Amelia could do nothing to help them. The case was stalled. There was no concrete evidence against Amelia, but there was also no proof of her innocence. The documents had not been found. The briefcase had been collected as evidence, but it was empty when the police examined it. It was Richard Blackwood's word against Amelia's, and everyone knew which way the scales tilted. It had been a week since the arrest when something began to change. Mr. Blackwood, seeing the deteriorating state of his daughters, finally gave in and called a child psychologist specializing in trauma. Not because he truly cared, but because the girls were so unwell that he feared something worse would happen. Dr. Beatrice. Crane was a woman in her 40s, with greying hair tied in a bun and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. She had worked with children in traumatic situations for over 15 years and had a reputation for reaching where other professionals failed. When she first entered the twins' room, she didn't try to force contact. She didn't ask questions. She didn't invade their space. She simply sat on the floor at a respectful distance and began to draw in a notebook she had brought. Chloe and Olivia watched her with suspicion, hugging each other as always. But gradually curiosity began to overcome fear. What was this woman drawing? Dr. Crane drew a garden full of flowers. She drew two girls holding hands in the center. She drew the sun shining in the sky. And then, carefully, she left the notebook on the floor and moved away. It took almost an hour, but eventually Olivia crawled to the notebook and looked. Chloe followed close behind. They examined the drawing in silence, and then Olivia picked up a colored pencil that was nearby and began to add details. A tree here, different flowers there. Dr. Crane smiled but said nothing. She just watched, giving them space, showing that she was there but not a threat. In the following days, she repeated the pattern. She would arrive, sit on the floor, draw or read a book, and simply exist in the same space as the girls without pressure. Slowly, very slowly, the distance between them decreased. In the second week, Chloe approached and sat next to Dr. Crane while she read. She said nothing, just stayed there. Olivia soon joined them. It was progress. Amelia, in her cell, knew none of this. She just waited, prayed, and tried to keep hope alive. Julia had said she would hire a private lawyer as soon as she could save up the money, but they both knew it would be difficult. Her sister's salary barely covered basic expenses. What Amelia didn't know was that Dr. Crane was much more than just a child psychologist. She had worked as an expert witness in cases of abuse and neglect, had connections with lawyers specializing in children's rights, and had a keen instinct for detecting when something was fundamentally wrong in a situation, and in this case everything screamed that something was wrong. 2 weeks after Amelia's arrest, Dr. Crane finally achieved what no one else had. During a quiet session in the room with only her and the twins, Olivia took a notebook from under the bed, a notebook full of hidden drawings, kept like precious treasures or secret evidence. She showed the drawings to Dr. Crane one by one. Each page told a part of the story. The office, the briefcase, their father moving the briefcase hidden in the playroom, Amelia cleaning far away, not touching anything. Dr. Crane examined each drawing carefully, her heart racing. These children were witnesses. They had seen something. Something that could change everything. "Did you see this happen?" she asked gently. Chloe nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy hid the briefcase. Amelia didn't take anything. She was just cleaning." Her voice was low, hesitant, but firm. It was the first time she had spoken to the psychologist in complete sentences. Olivia added, pointing to a specific drawing, "We saw everything. Daddy doesn't know we saw, but we always see." Dr. Crane held the girl's hands gently. "You are very brave, and I am going to help you. I will make sure the right people see these drawings. I will make sure the truth comes out." The twins hugged her, finally finding an adult they could trust, someone who believed them, someone who would see the truth they had been trying to show from the beginning. Dr. Crane left the mansion that afternoon with the drawings carefully tucked into her briefcase. She knew she had to act cautiously. Richard Blackwood was a powerful man, and if he found out what she was doing before she had concrete proof, he could destroy everything. She drove straight to the office of Marcus Vance, a lawyer specializing in children's rights with whom she had worked on several cases over the years. Marcus was known for not being afraid to take on powerful people when children were in danger. Beatrice spread the drawings on his desk, telling him everything the twins had revealed. Marcus examined each image with growing attention, his expression becoming more serious with each page. "This is a child's testimony. Under normal circumstances, it would be difficult to use in court, but these drawings are too consistent to be ignored. They are clearly trying to tell us something. Beatrice nodded. It's not just that. Their behavior changed drastically after the nanny's arrest. They fell into a deep depression, refused food, isolated themselves completely. This is consistent with children who have witnessed a grave injustice and feel powerless to correct it. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. We need more than drawings and behavior. We need physical evidence. Do you have access to the mansion? Yes, I go there every day for sessions with the girls. Then I need you to observe everything. Look for security cameras, for anything that might have recorded what really happened. And we need to find out where those documents really are. Beatrice spent the next few days doing just that. During her sessions with the twins, she observed every detail of the mansion. She noticed modern security cameras at several key points in the house, all clearly visible and working. But she also noticed something interesting. A secondary hallway near the kitchen had an old camera half hidden behind a decorative plant. It seemed to have been forgotten when the new system was installed. In the next session, she casually mentioned to Elizabeth that she was impressed with the house's security system. The housekeeper, who was beginning to trust the psychologist, said more than she should have. Oh yes, Mr. Blackwood installed new cameras last year, but he left some of the old ones in less important places. Said it wasn't worth taking them out. That one near the pantry still works, you know. I saw him checking the recordings from it once. Beatrice felt her heart race. If that old camera still worked and recorded, it might have captured movements through the hallway that led to the office and the stairs up to the playroom. She passed the information to Marcus, who immediately got to work. He needed a court order to access the recordings, but first he had to convince a judge that there was sufficient reason to doubt Richard Blackwood's version of events. Meanwhile, Beatrice continued to work with the twins. They were opening up more and more, and the psychologist used specialized techniques to help them express what they knew without being re-traumatized. Chloe, can you show me in the drawing where you were when you saw your father with the briefcase? Chloe picked up a pencil and drew a slightly open door. We were hiding. Daddy didn't know we were awake, Olivia added. We're always awake when he walks around the house at night. He never knows. And you saw him take the briefcase from the office? They both nodded. He took it to the playroom, hid it in the big closet, behind the game boxes. And after that? Chloe looked at Olivia, and the two seemed to communicate silently before answering. Then he made calls, said he knew what to do, that he had someone to blame. Beatrice felt a chill. These children had witnessed their father planning to frame an innocent person, and that person was someone they loved. You know that Amelia didn't do anything wrong, don't you? We always knew, said Olivia, her voice breaking. That's why we screamed when they took her. We wanted someone to listen, someone to know. But nobody listened, Chloe completed, tears streaming down her face. Nobody ever listens to us. Beatrice hugged the two girls. I'm listening, and I'm going to make sure others listen too. I promise. It was then that she asked something crucial. Girls, do you know what was in the briefcase? Did you see what your father took out of it? Chloe shook her head. We only saw the briefcase, but we heard him talking on the phone. He said they were important papers, that they proved bad things he did, and that he needed to hide them from people who were investigating, Olivia added. He said he was going to put everything in a place nobody would look, a place outside the house. Beatrice noted everything carefully. After the session, she went out and immediately called Marcus. The girls heard him on the phone talking about hiding the documents outside the house, somewhere no one would look. Marcus was silent for a moment, thinking, the property has extensive gardens, doesn't it? If he buried something there, it would be almost impossible to find without knowing exactly where to look. That's where we come in, Beatrice said. I'm going to ask the girls to show me if they saw anything. In the next session, Beatrice took the twins to the window overlooking the garden. Did you see your father do anything in the garden? Bury something, maybe? Olivia ran to get paper and a pencil. She drew the garden from above, with trees, flower beds, and a stone path. Then, carefully, She drew colored stars on a specific spot near a large tree at the back of the property. He went there at night with a shovel we saw from our bedroom window. Chloe pointed to their window. You can see everything from up here. We're always watching. It's our way of knowing what's happening. Beatrice photographed the drawing and sent it to Marcus immediately. The lawyer acted fast. With the children's drawings, the psychologist's testimony about their behavior, and evidence of inconsistencies in Richard Blackwood's story, he managed to convince a judge to issue a search warrant. 2 days later, Beatrice was at the mansion for her regular session when she saw several cars arrive. Police, investigators, and Marcus Vance. She kept the twins in their room, shielding them from the commotion happening downstairs. Richard Blackwood was furious, demanding to know by what authority they were invading his property. But Marcus showed him the court order, and he had no choice but to allow the search. First, they went to the secondary hallway and found the old camera. A technician examined it and confirmed it was still working and recording, overwriting old footage weekly. But crucially, the recordings from the 2 weeks before Amelia's arrest were still there. When they played the footage on a laptop right there in the hallway, the truth became crystal clear. The recordings showed Richard Blackwood leaving his office late at night, carrying the black briefcase. It showed him going up the stairs. It showed him coming down minutes later, without the briefcase. And from an angle that caught part of the upper hallway, it was possible to see 2 small silhouettes, Chloe and Olivia, hidden behind a door, watching everything. Other recordings from the main system had been deleted, but these from a forgotten camera remained untouched. Richard Blackwood turned pale when he saw the images. He tried to argue that he had moved the briefcase for security reasons, that he had the right to do what he wanted with his own belongings, but his explanation sounded hollow in the face of the visual evidence. Then the investigators went to the garden, following the map drawn by Olivia. They dug at the spot marked with stars, and after almost an hour of work, they found waterproof containers buried 2 feet deep. Inside the containers were hundreds of documents, fraudulent contracts, records of illegal transactions, evidence of money laundering, bribery of public officials, and intentional destruction of evidence in other investigations. It was a complete archive of corporate crimes accumulated over years. Richard Blackwood tried to argue that the documents had been planted there, but it was too late. The recordings proved he had hidden something, and the documents found were clearly authentic, many with his own signature. Marcus Vance requested access to the twins, and with Beatrice's permission and under her supervision, the girls were heard, not in a formal interrogation, but in a gentle conversation, where they could explain through drawings and simple words what they had seen. Chloe, holding Dr. Crane's hand, said in a clear voice, "Daddy hid the briefcase. Amelia was far away, cleaning. She didn't touch anything, he lied." Olivia, with the courage that only truth can give, added, "We wanted to tell from the beginning, but nobody asked us. Only Dr. Crane listened." The children's words, combined with the physical evidence and the recordings, formed an irrefutable case. Richard Blackwood was arrested on the spot, charged with multiple crimes: corporate fraud, money laundering, false accusations, obstruction of justice, and more crimes that would be uncovered as the documents were analyzed. As he was led away, the twins watched from their bedroom window, holding each other. There was no joy on their faces, only sadness. He was their father, after all, however flawed, but there was also a glimmer of something new. Justice. The feeling that, for the first time, someone had listened, someone had believed, and the truth had prevailed. Amelia was lying on the narrow cell bed when she heard hurried footsteps in the corridor. They were different from the usual steps, filled with urgency. She sat up, her heart tight, not knowing whether to feel hope or fear. The door opened and there was the public defender, but this time he wasn't alone. An older man in a well-cut suit and with a leather briefcase entered with him, and there was something different in both their expressions. It wasn't the tired resignation of before. It was something Amelia hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. "Amelia," the older lawyer began, extending his hand. "My name is Marcus Vance. I work with children's rights, and I have news that will change everything." He opened his briefcase and began to show her the drawings. Chloe and Olivia's drawings, each one carefully documenting what they had witnessed. Amelia felt tears burn her eyes as she recognized Olivia's delicate strokes, Chloe's firmness in coloring the details. "They kept these the whole time," Amelia whispered, touching the papers with reverence. "They knew. They always knew." "More than that," Marcus continued, opening his laptop. "We have security camera footage that proves Richard Blackwood moved the briefcase the night before it was officially reported missing, and we found the documents he claimed were stolen. They were buried in his property's garden." Amelia couldn't process it all. It was too much information, too much of a turnaround, after weeks of believing she would spend years in prison for something she didn't do. "He was arrested this morning," Marcus said gently, "for multiple crimes: corporate fraud, money laundering, false accusations against you, obstruction of justice. The list is long, and you, Amelia, will be released immediately. We're already processing the paperwork." The tears finally fell, and Amelia didn't try to hold them back. She cried for the injustice she had suffered, for the fear she had felt, but mostly for the joy of knowing that the twins, her brave girls, had found a way to tell the truth. "And the girls, how are they?" It was Marcus who answered with a gentle smile. "Scared but strong, very strong. Dr. Beatrice Crane, the psychologist who worked with them, took very good care of them. They asked for you every day. And now, finally, they'll be able to see you." It took a few hours to complete all the bureaucracy, but finally Amelia was free. When she walked out of the police station, Julia was waiting outside, and the two sisters hugged, crying, right there on the sidewalk, not caring who saw. "I knew you were innocent. I always knew," Julia sobbed. Amelia held her younger sister's face. "You never doubted. Not for a second, and that kept me strong." Marcus Vance was waiting for them by his car. "Amelia, the girls are at the mansion with Dr. Crane. If you feel ready, we can go there now. They're anxious to see you." Amelia didn't have to think twice. She got in the car, Julia by her side, and they drove through the streets of New York toward the Upper East Side. Amelia looked out the window, seeing the city with new eyes. She was free. The truth had prevailed, and soon she would see the girls who had been brave enough to expose the lies of a powerful man. When the car stopped in front of the mansion, Amelia felt a tightness in her chest. So many memories in that place, good and bad. But most importantly, inside were two girls who needed her. Dr. Crane greeted her at the door. It was the first time they had met, but there was an immediate recognition between them. Two women who had fought, each in her own way, for justice and for the children. "They're in their room waiting. I told them you were coming. They're nervous, but in a good way." Amelia went. Up the stairs she knew so well, but this time each step was different. She was no longer an employee, no longer a suspect. She was someone who had been validated, whose innocence had been proven in the most public way possible. The bedroom door was ajar. Amelia paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then pushed the door wide open. Chloe and Olivia were sitting at the window, looking out. When they heard the door, they turned at the same time. For a second that felt like an eternity. No one moved. Then, as if a spell had been broken, the girls ran. Amelia knelt and hugged them as they threw themselves at her, the three of them crying, laughing, holding on to each other, as if they would fall apart if they let go. Chloe buried her face in Amelia's neck, and Olivia held her face with her small hands, as if needing to make sure she was real. "You came back to me," Amelia whispered, kissing both their foreheads. "You were so brave. So brave." "We tried to tell," Chloe sobbed. "We drew everything, we screamed, but nobody listened. Until Dr. Crane listened," Olivia completed. "And she believed us." Amelia looked at Beatrice, who was standing in the doorway with Julia and Marcus, tears in her own eyes. Amelia mouthed a silent thank you, and Beatrice nodded, understanding perfectly. They stayed like that for a long time, just hugging, letting the relief and joy wash away weeks of pain and fear. Eventually, they sat on the rug, and the twins began to tell her everything. How they had seen their father hide the briefcase. How they knew Amelia was innocent, but didn't know how to make anyone believe them. How scared they had been when they took her away. "And then you found Dr. Crane," Amelia said, smiling through her tears. "She was the first person who really listened to us," Chloe explained, "who didn't try to rush us or make us talk before we were ready. She stood by us even when it was hard," Olivia added, "just like you always did." Amelia hugged them both again, then looked at Beatrice. "I can never thank you enough for what you did for them, for me, for all of us." Beatrice came over and sat on the floor with them. "Children have important truths to tell. We just need to learn how to listen in the right way. Chloe and Olivia taught me as much as I helped them." Marcus, who had been standing discreetly by the door, finally spoke. "Amelia, there are legal matters we need to discuss. The girls' situation mainly. Richard Blackwood is in custody awaiting trial. The authorities are trying to locate the twins' maternal relatives to take temporary custody." The twins clung to Amelia immediately, panic visible on their faces. "Don't worry," Amelia reassured them. "We'll make sure you stay with good people, people who will take proper care of you," Beatrice added in a gentle voice. "We've already spoken with your mother's family. There's an aunt, your mother's sister, who lives upstate. She really wants to meet you and take care of you. She seems like a wonderful person." Chloe and Olivia looked at each other, that silent communication happening again. "Can we still see you?" Chloe asked Amelia, her voice small. "Every day if you want," Amelia promised. "Nothing will separate us again. Never again." The following days were a mix of relief and reorganization. The twins' aunt Laura arrived from upstate New York. She was a woman, in her 30s, an elementary school teacher with kind eyes and a warm smile. She explained that she had grown distant from the family when her brother-in-law, Richard, began to exhibit controlling behaviors after her sister's passing. But now, knowing the truth, she wanted more than anything to give her nieces the love and stability they deserved. Amelia stayed at the mansion during the transition, helping the girls adjust to their Aunt Laura. It was important that they didn't feel another abrupt disruption in their lives. Gradually, Chloe and Olivia began to open up to their aunt, especially when they realized she wasn't trying to replace anyone, but rather to add more love to their lives. Beatrice continued the sessions, now focusing on helping the girls process everything that had happened. The trauma of witnessing their father's actions, Amelia's arrest, the discovery of the truth. It was a lot for such young children to carry, but the twins were resilient. With Amelia back, with Aunt Laura proving to be loving and patient, and with Beatrice's continued support, they began to flourish again. They started smiling again, playing, drawing beautiful things instead of just documenting horrors. One afternoon, while Amelia was helping the girls pack their belongings for the move with their Aunt Laura, Olivia picked up a new piece of paper and started to draw. But this time it wasn't the office or the briefcase. It was a house with a garden, 3 smiling women, and 2 girls in the center holding hands. In the sky she drew a big bright sun. Chloe looked at the drawing and smiled. "That's our future," she said simply. And Amelia, looking at these 2 girls who had shown courage beyond their years, who had refused to let an injustice prevail even when it seemed impossible to correct, knew that yes, that was their future. A future full of light, love, and truth. The story began to leak to the press 3 days after Amelia's release. First, there were small notes on local news websites. Businessman arrested for fraud. Innocent nanny freed after false accusations. But then an investigative journalist, Peter Sands, started digging deeper. Peter worked for one of New York's major newspapers and had a reputation for not being afraid to expose the powerful when there was solid evidence of wrongdoing. When he heard the story, he immediately realized there was something much bigger there. It wasn't just about corporate fraud. It was about abuse of power, about how a rich man had tried to destroy an innocent person's life to cover his crimes, and about how 2 brave children had exposed the truth. He managed to interview Marcus Vance first, who provided the legal details of the case, always protecting the twins' identities as minors. Then he spoke with Dr. Crane, who explained, within the ethical limits of her profession, how she had worked with 2 traumatized children who had something important to say. And then Peter asked to speak with Amelia. She hesitated at first, The public exposure was frightening and she just wanted to move on with her life. But Marcus convinced her that her story needed to be told. Not only to completely clear her name, but to give a voice to all domestic workers who might one day find themselves in a similar situation. The interview took place in the living room of the small apartment Amelia shared with Julia. Peter Sands was a middle-aged man with a worn-out notebook and eyes that conveyed sincerity. "Amelia, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I know this is a difficult time." Amelia nodded, her hands clasped in her lap. "I want people to understand what really happened, not just to me, but to those girls. They lived in fear and without a voice for so long. Tell me about your relationship with the twins. How did you become so important to them?" Amelia began to speak, and the words flowed more easily than she expected. She told him about the early days in the mansion, about how the girls were shy and withdrawn, about how she had slowly built trust, respecting their boundaries. She spoke of the games, the stories, the little rituals they had created together. "They had no one but me. Their father was always too busy, always too distant, and the other nannies before me didn't have the patience to understand that those girls just needed time and love. And then came the arrest. What was it like to be accused of something you didn't do?" Amelia's voice trembled as she remembered. "It was like the floor had disappeared from under me. I knew I was innocent, but I also knew no one would believe me against a rich and powerful man. I felt fear, anger, despair, but the worst part was imagining what was happening to the girls. They had seen the truth and had no way to make it heard." Peter jotted everything down, but every now and then he would stop just to listen, recognizing the profound humanity of the story. "What would you say to other people who work in the homes of wealthy families? How can they protect themselves?" Amelia thought carefully before answering. "Document everything. Always be professional, but keep records, and know that your word has value too, even when it seems like it doesn't. The truth eventually comes out, but only if you don't give up fighting for it." Peter Sands' article was published on the front page of the newspaper 2 days later. The headline was direct and impactful. "Two children expose millionaire father's lies to save innocent nanny." The report told the whole story, with carefully verified details, always protecting the twins' identities but not sparing Richard Blackwood. The reaction was immediate and massive. On social media, a hashtag created by readers quickly became one of the country's top trending topics. People shared the story, expressed outrage at Richard Blackwood's behavior, admiration for the twins' courage, and support for Amelia. Other media outlets picked up the story. Television shows invited Amelia for interviews. She accepted a few, always with Marcus by her side to ensure her rights were respected. In one of these interviews, on a popular morning show, the host asked a question that caught Amelia by surprise. "Amelia, now that you've been exonerated and Richard Blackwood is facing charges for his crimes, do you plan to sue him civilly, for emotional distress, for the days you spent unjustly imprisoned, for the trauma?" Amelia was silent for a moment, and when she answered, her voice was firm but gentle. "What he destroyed in me cannot be priced in money. He tried to take my dignity, my reputation, my freedom. But those two girls gave me back something much greater. They gave me back the truth, and the truth is worth more than any financial compensation. I want him to face justice for the crimes he committed, but I choose to move on with my life, not to be tied to him through lawsuits that could last for years." The interviewer seemed touched by her response. "That's very generous of you." Amelia smiled, but there was firmness in her eyes. "It's not generosity, it's liberation. I won't let him continue to control my life even through a legal process. I've spent too much time under his shadow." The clip of that interview went viral. People all over the country commented on Amelia's dignity and wisdom. She became, unintentionally, a symbol of resilience and forgiveness, but also of justice. Because she had made it clear that forgiving did not mean letting him go unpunished. Richard Blackwood would have to answer for his crimes, and answer he did. The trial was set for 3 months. Later, and the case continued to make headlines. The prosecutors had more than enough evidence. The documents found in the garden proved years of corporate fraud. The security recordings showed Richard hiding the briefcase. The testimony of experts confirmed that the twins' drawings were consistent with truthful accounts from child witnesses. But what really sealed Richard's fate were his own records. In the buried documents, investigators found not only proof of fraud, but also handwritten notes detailing how he planned to frame Amelia. There were drafts of his false narrative, calculations on how to make the story convincing, even notes on how to use his power and influence to ensure no one questioned his version. During this time, Amelia began to receive messages of support from all over the country. Domestic workers who had been through similar situations, people who admired her strength, labor rights organizations that wanted to collaborate with her. And surprisingly, donations began to arrive. Ordinary people sending small amounts, saying they wanted to help, that her story had touched their hearts. One night, Amelia was in the apartment with Julia, looking at the bank statement showing the accumulated donations. "This is a lot of money, Julia. I don't know what to do with it all," Julia, always practical, suggested. "You could invest in something that helps other people like you, other nannies, domestic workers, people who work in homes and are vulnerable." Amelia thought about it for days, and then, during a visit to the twins at their Aunt Laura's house upstate, she had an idea. She was watching Chloe and Olivia play in the garden, free and happy in a way they had never been at the mansion, when Beatrice sat down beside her. "They're doing well, aren't they?" Amelia asked. "Very well, Aunt Laura is wonderful with them. Patient, loving, present, exactly what they needed." "Beatrice," Amelia began, turning to face her, "have you ever thought about creating a program to help other children like the twins? Children who witness things they shouldn't see but have no voice to tell?" Beatrice looked at her with growing interest. "I think about it every day. There are so many children who carry heavy secrets, who know about injustices but have no way to communicate them in a way that adults understand. What if we created something?" Amelia continued, the idea taking shape as she spoke. "An institute, not just for children but for domestic workers too. A place that offers legal support, psychological counseling, education about rights. A place that teaches adults how to listen to children the right way." Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes shining. "A resource center, with lawyers who would work pro bono or at a reduced rate, psychologists specializing in child trauma, workshops on labor rights. It would be revolutionary." Amelia nodded, feeling for the first time since it all began that there was a greater purpose to her suffering. What he tried to destroy in me can become something that protects others. The twins taught me that even the smallest and seemingly powerless can change everything when the truth is on their side. I want to give that same chance to other children, other workers. The two women looked at each other, and in that moment, a partnership was born that would change many lives. Amelia had the resources from the donations and her lived experience. Beatrice had the professional knowledge and connections in the field of child psychology. Together they would start something new, something necessary, something that would turn pain into hope. Richard Blackwood's trial began on a cold, August morning at the New York County Supreme Court. Outside the courthouse, dozens of journalists and cameras waited, while protesters held signs with messages of support for Amelia and justice for domestic workers. The story had captured the public's imagination in a way few cases could. Amelia was present, sitting in the gallery next to Julia and Marcus Vance. She had debated whether to go, but in the end, she decided she needed to see it through. She needed to look Richard Blackwood in the eye and know that justice was being served. Beatrice was also there, but not in the gallery. She was prepared to testify as an expert on the twins' behavior and drawings. The girls themselves would not have to appear in court, thanks to Marcus's careful work in ensuring their testimonies were collected in an age-appropriate manner, through recordings in a controlled environment with psychological support. When Richard entered the room, escorted by guards, Amelia felt her stomach turn. He looked different. The impeccable suit had been replaced by simple clothes. The air of superiority had given way to something closer to resignation. But when his eyes met Amelia's, she saw anger there. Anger at being exposed, at having lost everything. Amelia held Julia's hand and kept her gaze steady. She would never be afraid of him again. The prosecutor was an experienced man named Henry Taylor, known for his tenacity in white-collar cases. He opened his case with clarity and precision, presenting the timeline of events, the physical evidence, the testimonies. The defendant, Richard Blackwood, not only committed large-scale corporate fraud, money laundering, and destruction of evidence. He went further. When he realized investigators were closing in, he deliberately planned to frame an innocent person, a woman who worked in his home, who cared for his daughters, who trusted him as an employer. He used his power and influence to have her arrested, to destroy her reputation, and to nearly destroy her life. Richard's defense, led by a very expensive New York lawyer, tried to argue that the documents had been misinterpreted, that the briefcase had been moved for legitimate security reasons, that there was no intention to harm Amelia. But every argument crumbled in the face of the overwhelming evidence. The security recordings were shown on a large screen. The room fell silent as they watched Richard carrying the briefcase late at night, going up the stairs, clearly hiding something. And then, in a grainy but clear enough image, the two small silhouettes of Chloe and Olivia hidden behind a door, watching. When it was Beatrice's turn to testify, she explained to the jury how she had worked with the twins. Children of this age do not fabricate consistent and detailed stories over weeks. The drawings that Chloe and Olivia created show a clear and repetitive pattern. They were trying to communicate something they had witnessed, something that disturbed them deeply. When I finally gained their trust, they told me exactly what they had seen, and what they described perfectly matches the physical evidence found. The defense attorney tried to question the validity of testimony from such young children. Dr. Crane, isn't it true that children of this age can easily confuse reality with fantasy? Beatrice faced him firmly. Children can have active imaginations in play and stories, but when they report traumatic events they have witnessed, especially consistently over time and through different modes of expression, the probability of it being true is extremely high. Furthermore, their drawings were not fantastical. They were documentation. There was a clear difference between the creative drawings they made for fun and these drawings they repeated obsessively, trying to tell something. One of the most powerful moments of the trial was when the prosecutor presented Richard's handwritten documents found with the fraud papers. There, in his own handwriting, was the plan to frame Amelia, instructions to himself on how to plant suspicion, how to use his influence, how to ensure she looked guilty. The silence in the courtroom was absolute as the prosecutor read aloud. If necessary, use the nanny as a scapegoat. She has access, has financial need, and lacks the resources to defend herself properly. It will be the perfect solution. Amelia closed her eyes upon hearing those words. To know that he had planned her destruction so coldly, so calculatedly, was painful in a way she hadn't expected. But it was also validating. It proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she never stood a chance against him. Not for lack of innocence, but because he had set it all up from the beginning. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses were called. Financial document experts explained the fraud. Psychologists discussed the impact on Amelia and the children. And through it all, Richard remained silent, his lawyer doing all the work while he just watched, his expression increasingly defeated. On the last day, Amelia was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand with trembling legs, but when she sat down and looked at the jury, she felt an inner calm she hadn't expected. The prosecutor guided her through her testimony. She spoke about her work at the mansion, her relationship with the twins, the day she was arrested. Her voice only trembled when she described hearing the girls' screams as she was led away. That was the worst part of it all. Not the arrest, not the accusations. It was knowing that those children were watching someone they loved being taken away unjustly, and there was nothing I could do to protect them from that pain. When she finished, the defense attorney had his chance to cross-examine her. He tried to find inconsistencies in her story, suggest she might have had motives to steal, question if she was really as innocent as she claimed. Amelia answered every question with simple honesty. She didn't try to embellish anything, didn't try to make herself seem perfect. She just told the truth, and the truth was her strength. Finally, it was time for closing arguments. The prosecutor summarized the case with controlled passion. This is not just a case about corporate fraud, although the financial crimes are serious. This is a case about abuse of power in its purest form. Richard Blackwood used his wealth and influence to try to destroy an innocent life. He calculated that no one would believe a nanny over him. He was almost right. But what he didn't count on was the courage of two small children who refused to let an injustice prevail. Two children who, despite their fear, despite their age, found a way to expose the truth. The defense attorney did his best, but his argument sounded empty in the face of the evidence. He asked for leniency, spoke of Richard's contributions to the economy, suggested there was room for alternative interpretations. But even he seemed to know he was fighting a losing battle. The jury retired to deliberate. Amelia, Julia, Beatrice, and Marcus waited in an anteroom, drinking weak coffee from a machine and trying not to overthink what was happening. But everyone knew the evidence was overwhelming. The question wasn't if Richard would be convicted, but for how long. It took only 4 hours for the jury to return, a surprisingly short time for such a complex case, which usually indicated unanimity. When everyone returned to the courtroom, Amelia felt her heart beat so loudly she was sure everyone could hear. The judge, a man in his 60s with a stern but fair expression, asked the jury if they had reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor." On the charge of corporate fraud, how does the jury find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of money laundering? Guilty. On the charge of false accusations? Guilty. One by one the crimes were listed, and one by one the answer was the same. Guilty. 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 Amelia felt tears stream down her face, but these were tears of relief, of validation, of justice finally being served. Richard showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. He simply stood there, staring ahead, as if he were somewhere else. The judge then delivered the sentence. Considering the severity of the crimes, the abuse of power, the impact on the victims, and the total lack of remorse shown, Richard Blackwood was sentenced to 20 years in prison. His assets were frozen, his companies dissolved, and he was ordered to pay substantial compensation to Amelia and to the institutions that had helped in the case. Amelia left the courthouse surrounded by supporters. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, but she just smiled through her tears. It was a smile of liberation, of finally being able to move on without that weight on her shoulders. That night, she called Aunt Laura to speak with the twins. When Chloe and Olivia answered, their voices buzzed with excitement. "Amelia, Aunt Laura told us he was found guilty." "He was, girls. Thanks to you. Your courage made all the difference." There was a pause, and then Olivia asked in a small voice, "Does this mean we'll never have to live in fear again?" Amelia felt her heart ache. "That's exactly what it means, my love. You are safe now, and you will stay safe forever." 3 months after the trial, Amelia stood in front of a 2-story building in the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn. The building wasn't large or luxurious, but it had something she loved: wide windows that let in lots of light, a small garden out front, and enough space to create something meaningful. Beside her were Beatrice, Marcus, Julia, and a group of volunteers who had joined the project. They all looked at the building with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was where the dream would become a reality. "Well," Amelia said, taking a deep breath, "shall we go in and get started?" The financial compensation from the court, combined with the donations that continued to pour in, had allowed Amelia to buy and renovate the building. The ground floor would be dedicated to domestic workers. There would be a legal consultation room where volunteer lawyers could meet with people needing guidance on their rights, a workshop room where they would offer courses on labor law, how to document working conditions, and how to protect themselves from abuse, and a psychological support room, because Amelia understood that the trauma of being wronged went far beyond the legal. The upper floor would be for the children. Beatrice had designed every detail with care: colorful rooms where children could express themselves through art, music, and play. A special interview room designed to be welcoming and non-intimidating, where children who needed to testify in legal cases could do so in a gentle and appropriate manner. And a small library with books that taught about emotions, about telling the truth, about being brave. In the following weeks, Amelia and Beatrice worked tirelessly. They painted walls, assembled furniture, organized materials. Julia, who was finishing her education degree, joined the team as a volunteer educator. Marcus coordinated the legal aspects, recruiting lawyers willing to donate a few hours a month. One day, while organizing books in the children's library, Beatrice looked at Amelia with a smile. "Do you realize what we're doing? We're turning your pain into healing for other people." Amelia smiled back, holding a children's book about truth and courage. "That's exactly what Chloe and Olivia taught me, that even the most difficult experiences can become something good if we let them." The Institute needed a name. They debated several options, but in the end, a suggestion from the twins themselves won. During a visit, the girls had drawn a logo, two small hands holding a shining star. Underneath, they wrote in their careful, childish handwriting, "The Little Voices Institute." When Amelia saw the drawing, she knew immediately it was perfect. Little voices, but powerful ones. Voices that deserved to be heard. The Institute opened its doors in November, 6 months after the trial. The opening ceremony was simple but emotional. Present were local domestic workers, child psychologists, lawyers, journalists, and many ordinary people who had followed the story and wanted to support them. Amelia gave a short speech, her voice not always steady but always sincere. "This place was born from pain, but it exists to create hope. It was born from injustice, but it exists to promote justice. I learned the hard way that powerless people can be easily ignored and abused, but I also learned through two extraordinary girls that the truth has a strength of its own, and that when we give a voice to the voiceless, miracles can happen." Beatrice spoke next, explaining the programs they would offer. "Children carry important truths, but often they don't know how to communicate them in ways that adults understand. Here we will create protocols and techniques so that children can express difficult experiences without being re-traumatized. We will train professionals to truly listen, and we will ensure that when a child needs to testify in a legal case, they can do so with dignity and support." Marcus spoke about the legal side of the Institute. Many domestic workers don't know their rights. They don't know they have legal protections, and when they are abused or falsely accused, they often lack the resources to defend themselves. Here, we will offer free legal consultations, representation when necessary, and education on labor rights. At the end of the ceremony, everyone was invited to come inside and see the Institute. Amelia guided groups through the building, showing each room with pride. She saw people's eyes light up as they understood what was being offered there. She saw domestic workers crying with gratitude, knowing they would have a place to go if they needed it. She saw parents of traumatized children finding hope that their children could have a voice. And then, in the middle of the afternoon, a car pulled up in front of the Institute. Amelia looked out the window, and her heart leaped. It was Aunt Laura with Chloe and Olivia. The twins jumped out of the car and ran inside, their faces lit with excitement. They had grown in the past few months. They were taller, more confident, happier. But when they hugged Amelia, it was as if no time had passed. "We want to see everything," Chloe exclaimed, pulling Amelia by the hand. Amelia guided them through the Institute, explaining each room, each program. The girls absorbed everything with their characteristic intensity. When they reached the art room on the upper floor, Olivia stopped in front of a blank wall. "Can we paint a mural here, for the Institute?" Amelia looked at Beatrice, who nodded with a smile. "Of course you can. This place is as much yours as it is ours." In the following days, Chloe and Olivia returned with paints and brushes. With the help of Julia, who revealed a hidden artistic talent, they began to work on the mural. It took a week to complete, but when they finished, it was breathtaking. The mural depicted a garden full of colorful, vibrant flowers. In the center, two girls holding hands looked up at a sky where birds of all colors flew. Beside them, a smiling woman embraced them. And above it all, a huge, bright sun illuminated the entire scene, its rays extending to the edges of the wall. But the most touching detail was that scattered throughout the garden among the flowers were small figures, children of all ages, some smiling, some crying, some holding hands, and above each of them small golden stars floated, representing their voices being heard. When the mural was finished, All the staff and volunteers of the Institute gathered to see it. There was a moment of reverent silence, and then applause filled the room. Amelia hugged the twins, tears streaming freely. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. It will remind everyone who enters here of what we're doing and why." The Institute quickly began to make a difference. In the first week, 3 domestic workers came for help. One was being threatened with wrongful termination. Another hadn't been paid her salary in months. The third was being pressured to work unpaid overtime. Marcus and his team of volunteer lawyers worked on each case, and in all of them, they achieved positive results. On the children's side, Beatrice began receiving referrals from social workers and schools. Children who had witnessed domestic violence, children who knew of abuse but were afraid to tell, children who needed to testify in court but were terrified. One case in particular deeply touched Amelia. An 8-year-old girl named Anna had witnessed her mother being abused by her stepfather. But when the police came, she was so scared she couldn't speak. The case was stalled because without the child's testimony, there wasn't enough evidence. Beatrice worked with Anna for weeks, using the same techniques she had used with Chloe and Olivia. Art, play, a gradual building of trust. And eventually, Anna was able to tell her story. Not in direct words at first, but through drawings, play with dolls, and small whispers that gradually became a full voice. Anna's testimony, collected appropriately in the safe environment of the Institute, was used in court. The stepfather was convicted, and Anna and her mother were able to rebuild their lives in safety. When Amelia heard the result, she called Beatrice with tears in her voice. "A life saved, at least one life where we made a difference." Beatrice, equally emotional, replied, "One of many. This is just the beginning." And it truly was. As the months passed, the Institute served more and more people. Workers finding justice, children finding their voices, families being reunited, truths being told. Each story was unique, but they all shared something in common: the need to be heard, believed, and supported. The Institute also began to offer public workshops. Beatrice gave lectures on how to recognize signs that a child was keeping a heavy secret. Amelia shared her story and spoke about labor rights. Marcus taught about how to document abuse and build legal cases. The lectures were always packed and often ended with long lines of people wanting to talk, share their own stories, ask for advice. It was exhausting but gratifying. One evening, after a particularly busy lecture, Amelia and Beatrice were sitting in the staff room, drinking tea and resting their sore feet. "Do you think we're really making a difference?" Amelia asked, suddenly insecure. "Or is it just a drop in the ocean?" Beatrice looked at her with that wise, gentle smile. "Every person we help is an entire universe. For that domestic worker who finally received her back pay, we made all the difference in the world. For that child who finally got to tell her truth, we changed the course of her entire life. Yes, there's still a lot of work to do, but every drop matters, Amelia. Every drop matters." Amelia smiled, feeling the tension leave her shoulders. Beatrice was right. They couldn't save the whole world, but they could save whole worlds, one person at a time. 2 years had passed since the inauguration of the Little Voices Institute, and the impact was undeniable. What began as a modest project had grown beyond all expectations. The original building in Park Slope now had 3 satellite offices spread across the New York metropolitan area, with plans to expand to other cities. Amelia was in her small office, reviewing reports that would show funders the work they had accomplished. The numbers were impressive. Over 500 domestic workers had received legal assistance. 180 children had gone through the support programs. Dozens of legal cases resolved, dozens of truths finally told. But Amelia knew that behind every number was a human story. Like Mrs. Davison, 60 years old, who worked for 15 years without a contract and, with the Institute's help, managed to sue her former employer and receive all her due rights. Like little Gabriel, 6 years old, who witnessed something he shouldn't have and carried that weight alone for months until Beatrice helped him find words for the truth. Like Rachel, a 19-year-old who worked in a house and suffered constant harassment but was too afraid to report. Until the Institute gave her the legal and emotional support to do the right thing. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Beatrice entered, carrying a stack of drawings. "Look at this," she said, spreading the papers on Amelia's desk. "The work from this week's children's group. The theme was hope." Amelia examined the drawings one by one. There were rainbows over happy houses, families holding hands, children smiling under the sun. But one drawing in particular caught her eye. It was from a 7-year-old girl named Livia, who had come to the Institute 2 months ago, traumatized, after witnessing something difficult at home. Livia's drawing showed a little girl holding a star. The star shone brightly, illuminating everything around it. And in the corner of the paper, in careful letters, she had written something that brought tears to Amelia's eyes. "My voice matters too." Amelia showed the drawing to Beatrice, who smiled through her own tears. She gets it. She finally understands that she has power, that her voice has value. "That's what we do here, isn't it?" Amelia said softly. "We help people discover the power they always had but didn't know how to use." That afternoon, the Institute received a special visit. Chloe and Olivia, now 9 years old, arrived with their Aunt Laura. They came regularly, sometimes to help with the younger children, sometimes just to visit Amelia and Beatrice. The twins had changed so much in the past few years. They were still close, still had that special communication between them, but now they were also open with other people. They spoke to strangers without fear, laughed out loud, ran and played with the freedom that children should always have. "Amelia," Olivia ran to hug her. "We brought something for you." Chloe was holding a cardboard folder. Inside was a school project they had done together. It was about American heroines, and they had included Amelia. "Look," Chloe explained, pointing to the carefully decorated pages. "We wrote about you and the Institute, and our teacher said it was the best project in the class." Amelia read the text, her vision blurring. The girls had told the story in a simple but powerful way. How their nanny had been wronged, how they had found the courage to tell the truth, how that painful experience had transformed into something that helped many people. "I'm not a heroine," Amelia said softly. "You two are the heroines of this story." Olivia shook her head firmly. "We all are. You, us, Dr. Crane, Mr. Vance. Everyone who is part of this. That's what our teacher explained, that real heroes are ordinary people who do the right thing even when it's hard." Amelia hugged the two girls, her heart overflowing with love and pride. They had become such wise, strong, empathetic children. That week, the Institute organized a recognition event. It was to celebrate 2 years of work and honor the people who had made it all possible. Domestic workers who were now volunteers, helping others going through the same situations. Children who had found their voices and now helped other children find theirs. Lawyers, psychologists, educators, everyone who had donated time and talent to the cause. The hall was full of people. Amelia looked around and saw familiar faces. Elizabeth, the former housekeeper from Richard's mansion, who now worked as a consultant for the Institute, teaching about the dynamics of wealthy households. The journalist Peter Sands, who continued to cover stories on labor rights and had become a constant ally. Mrs. Davison, who, after resolving her own case, dedicated her afternoons to helping other workers understand their rights. And there, in a place of honor at the front, were Chloe and Olivia with their Aunt Laura. The girls wore pretty dresses and even prettier smiles, clearly proud to be part of it all. Amelia went up to the small makeshift stage and looked out at the audience. So many faces, so many stories, so much progress. When this all started, I was alone in a cell, unjustly accused, without hope. Today, I'm surrounded by a community of people who believe in justice, in truth and in the power of giving a voice to the voiceless. This transformation was only possible because of each and every one of you. She spoke about the work accomplished, the numbers achieved, the plans for the future. But then her voice grew softer, more personal. But more important than any number is the individual impact. It's the worker who finally receives the respect she deserves. It's the child who can sleep at night because she no longer carries a heavy secret alone. It's the family that rebuilds because the truth came to light. Those are the victories that truly matter. Beatrice spoke next, discussing the advances in child listening protocols and how the Institute was being nationally recognized as a reference in the field. Marcus presented data on legal cases won and changes in local policies for protecting domestic workers. And then came the most emotional moment of the night. Chloe and Olivia went up on stage, carrying something covered with a cloth. With a dramatic flourish that drew affectionate laughter from the audience, they unveiled a bronze plaque. It was the Institute's logo, the two small hands holding a star, with the words, "The Little Voices Institute," underneath. But there was something more. An inscription that read, "In memory of all the voices that were silenced, and in celebration of all the voices that can now be heard." The plaque would be placed at the entrance of the main building, a constant reminder of the purpose of it all. After the formal presentations, the party continued with music, food, and many lively conversations. Amelia circulated among the groups, thanking people, listening to stories, absorbing the positive energy that filled the space. In a quiet moment, she found herself outside in the small garden, looking at the stars. Julia joined her, putting an arm around her sister's shoulders. "Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay, Julia. I'm grateful for everything, even the hard parts, because they brought me here." Julia squeezed her hug. "Mum and Dad would be so proud of you, turning something so horrible into something so beautiful." Amelia thought of her parents who had passed away too soon, leaving two young daughters to fend for themselves. They had taught them about honesty, hard work, and never giving up. Those values had guided Amelia through the most difficult trial of her life. They taught us well, didn't they? They sure did. The sisters stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the music and laughter coming from inside. Then Chloe appeared at the door, looking for her. "Amelia, come see. Livia wants to show you something." Amelia followed Chloe back inside, where Livia, the 7-year-old girl who had drawn about her voice mattering, was surrounded by other children. She was holding a small guitar and, with encouragement from the group, began to sing a song she had written. The lyrics were simple, about finding courage, about telling the truth, about not being afraid, but it was sung with such conviction, with such raw emotion, that there wasn't a dry eye in the room when she finished. Amelia knelt in front of Livia when the song ended. "That was beautiful. You are so brave." Livia smiled, that radiant smile that only children who have overcome something difficult can give. "I learned it here. That being brave doesn't mean not being afraid, it means doing the right thing even when you're scared." Amelia hugged the girl, realizing that this was the true success of the Institute. Not the numbers, not the awards or recognitions that were beginning to come, but this, a child who had reclaimed her voice and her courage. A future changed, a life saved, a truth told. When the party finally ended and everyone went home, Amelia, Beatrice, and Marcus stayed to clean up. As they stacked chairs and collected disposable cups, they talked about the future. "I received an invitation to present our work at a national child psychology conference," Beatrice mentioned. "They want us to share our protocols with other professionals." "That's incredible," Amelia replied. "It means we can have an impact far beyond New York." "And there's more," Marcus added. "Some state legislators are interested in our model. They want to discuss possible changes in legislation to better protect domestic workers and facilitate child testimony in legal cases." Amelia stopped what she was doing and looked at the two friends who had become family. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure this is real, that we came from such a dark place to create so much light." Beatrice smiled. The light was always there. It was just hidden. Chloe and Olivia showed us where to look. 5 years. 5 years had passed since that terrible day when Amelia was taken from the mansion under false accusations. And on that sunny Sunday, she was back on the Upper East Side, but for very different reasons. The mansion where it all began now belonged to an educational foundation that had turned it into a cultural center for low-income children. The garden where Richard had buried his lies was now a space for art and music workshops. The office where he had plotted against Amelia was now a community library. Amelia walked through the corridors she knew so well, but everything felt different. lighter, more full of life. Children's voices echoed through the rooms, laughter filled the spaces that were once so silent and tense. "Are you okay being here?" Beatrice asked, walking beside her. Amelia nodded, smiling. "I'm more than okay. It's beautiful to see this place transformed into something positive. It's like even buildings can have second chances." They were there for a special presentation. The Little Voices Institute had been invited to speak to a group of university social work students about their work, and Chloe and Olivia, now 12 years old, had asked to participate. The twins were already in the garden when Amelia and Beatrice arrived, helping to arrange chairs. They had grown so much. They were still identical in many ways, but now each had her own distinct personality shining through. Chloe was more outgoing, always the first to speak, full of ideas and energy. Olivia was more thoughtful, observant, but when she spoke, her words carried a weight and wisdom beyond her years. "Amelia," Chloe waved, running to hug her. "Did you see? They turned the playroom into an art studio." "I did. It's perfect." Olivia approached more slowly, but her hug was just as warm. "It still feels strange to be here, but a good kind of strange, you know?" Amelia knew exactly what she meant. That place held painful memories, but it was also where everything had changed, where the truth had finally been revealed, where a story of injustice turned into a story of justice. The students began to arrive, young people full of idealism and a desire to make a difference in the world. Amelia watched them with affection, remembering when she herself was that young, full of dreams of working with children, never imagining the winding path life would take her on. The presentation began with Amelia telling her story. She had told it hundreds of times, but it never got easier. The emotions were still intense when she remembered the arrest, the despair, the feeling of helplessness. But now there was something more. There was resolution, there was purpose, there was meaning. "I thought my life was over," she said to the attentive audience. "I thought I would never be able to clear my name, that I would always carry that accusation like a stain, but I didn't count on the courage of two extraordinary girls." She gestured to Chloe and Olivia, who were sitting in the front row. They were only 7 years old, but they refused to let a lie prevail. They found creative ways to tell the truth when no one was listening, and when someone finally did listen, they changed everything. Beatrice spoke next, explaining the technical aspects of working with traumatized children, the importance of creating safe spaces for expression, the protocols they had developed that were now being used across the country. Children know so much more than we imagine. They see so much more. They understand so much more. Our job is not to teach or force, it is simply to create the conditions for them to share what they already know on their own terms and in their own time. Marcus presented the impressive data. The Institute now had 12 branches in 5 states. Over 2,000 domestic workers had received assistance. 500 children had gone through their programs. Legislative changes were being implemented based on their work. And most importantly, lives were being transformed every day. And then came the moment the students were most eagerly awaiting. Chloe and Olivia stood up to speak. The two went up to the small temporary stage set up in the garden. Chloe spoke first, her voice clear and confident. "When we were little, we saw something we shouldn't have, our father doing something wrong and blaming someone we loved. And the worst part wasn't seeing it, it was not being able to make anyone believe us." Olivia continued, her voice softer but just as firm. "We tried to tell through drawings, through screams, through everything we could. But no one paid attention, until Dr. Crane taught us that our voice always had power. We just needed someone who knew how to listen." Chloe resumed. "That's why the Institute's work is so important. It's not just about legal cases or labor rights. It's about making people understand that everyone has something important to say, even the little ones, even those who seem to have no power," Olivia concluded. "Amelia always told us that the truth has a strength of its own. And it's true. But sometimes the truth needs help to be heard. That's what you can do. Be the ears that the truth needs." There was a profound silence when they finished, followed by enthusiastic applause. Several students had tears in their eyes. Some raised their hands with questions, and Chloe and Olivia answered with impressive maturity. "How Did you deal with the fear of confronting your father? Olivia answered that one. We didn't confront him directly. We were too little for that. But we found adults we could trust and let them help us. There's no shame in needing help. Courage isn't doing everything alone. It's knowing when to ask for support. What would you say to other children who are keeping heavy secrets? Chloe leaned forward, looking directly at the students. That bad secrets shouldn't be kept. That if something is making you feel bad, scared, or confused, you need to tell someone, and if the first person doesn't believe you, tell someone else. Keep telling until someone really listens. The question and answer session continued for almost an hour. The students wanted to know everything: how the institute was funded, what kind of training the volunteers received, how they could get involved, how they could replicate the model in their own communities. Amelia, Beatrice, and Marcus answered patiently, seeing in the eyes of these young people the same passion for justice that had driven the entire project. When the presentation finally ended, many students stayed to talk individually. Some shared their own stories of injustice they had witnessed or experienced. Others asked for guidance on how to start similar projects. Some simply wanted to express admiration and gratitude for knowing such work existed. Amelia was talking to a young woman who wanted to specialize in children's rights when she felt a small hand touch her arm. It was a girl of perhaps 8, who had apparently come with one of the students. "Are you the Amelia from the story?" "I am." The girl looked at her feet for a moment before whispering, "I saw something bad happen too, and nobody believes me." Amelia knelt to be at the girl's level, her heart aching. "I believe you, and I know people who will listen to your story properly. Do you want me to help you tell it?" The girl nodded, tears beginning to fall. Amelia looked at the adult who had brought the child, a student named Fiona, and communicated silently. "We need to talk." Later, sitting in a private room inside the cultural center, with Beatrice present, the girl told her story through drawings and hesitant words. It was a difficult story, of things no child should witness. But with patience and care, Beatrice managed to gather enough information to take the next steps for protection. Fiona, the student, watched everything attentively. "That's why I brought her today. I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't know how to help. I thought maybe if she heard the twins' story, she would feel safe enough to tell her own." "You did the right thing," Amelia said. "You listened to your instincts and gave a voice to a child who desperately needed one." When they finally left the cultural center late in the afternoon, Amelia looked back one last time. The mansion that had been a symbol of so much fear and control was now a place of hope and growth. It was a physical transformation that mirrored the emotional transformation they had all undergone. In the car on the way home, with Julia driving and Beatrice in the passenger seat, Amelia thought about everything that had happened in 5 years. Richard Blackwood was serving his sentence, isolated from the world he once dominated, but his attempt to destroy Amelia had paradoxically created something much larger and more important than he ever could have imagined. The Little Voices Institute would continue to grow. More branches would open. More lives would be touched. More truths would be told. And all because 2 girls refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. Amelia took out her phone and sent a message to Chloe and Olivia, who had returned upstate with their Aunt Laura. "Thank you for today. You were perfect. I love you." The reply came quickly, a joint message from both. "You always taught us that the truth matters. Today we just showed other people what you first showed us. We love you too." Amelia smiled, putting her phone away and looking out the window. New York City passed. In a blur of lights and motion, a huge city full of untold stories, truths waiting to be heard, voices waiting to be discovered. But now there was a place for those voices. A place where small didn't mean powerless, where silence didn't mean acceptance, where every person, no matter their age or position, had the fundamental right to be heard and believed. And it had all started with a wronged nanny, 2 brave girls, and the unshakable belief that the truth, eventually, always finds its way to the light. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Amelia, Chloe, and Olivia has touched your hearts. This journey from injustice to justice, from silence to voice, shows that courage can come from the most unexpected places. To continue following exciting stories like this one, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives. Find it here on the side by clicking on the left. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative power of truth. Your stories and comments are important to us. Share in the comments how this narrative touched you, or if you know someone who has gone through a similar situation. Together, we continue to give a voice to those who most need to be heard. Until the next story.